Take me to another place where the fairy tales don't end. Magical, magical land, magical, magical land. To another place where the fairy tales don't end. Magical, magical land.
Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Connecteurs Innovation Show, where I meet with people to connect the dots of innovation. My name is Jens Heitland, and I'm the founder of Heitland Innovation, where I empower entrepreneurs to innovate. My guest today is the innovation master, or it's a mix between an innovation master and an experience guru. He's the director of the College of Extraordinary Experience and a coach at McKinsey and Company. And he is the author of the book, The Innovation Cycle. Please welcome to the show, Claus Raasted.
Thank you.
Hi, Claus.
Thank you. Good to see you.
How are you doing?
So that's an unfair question to ask a Scandinavian, because they'll just give you a truthful answer. It'll take half an hour and it'll be about their life, and you'll end up just as depressed as they are. So a tip to all of your listeners, never ask Scandinavians how they feel.
Okay, then we start. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself. Who are you? Why are you here?
I think a good way to describe me and also explain why I'm here is that when Jens wrote me and said, I'm doing an innovation breakfast podcast, you should show up with breakfast and then we eat breakfast and we talk. I just said yes, and I fixed breakfast. There's even a glass of orange juice. And I thought, great, that's what we're doing. And then I show up and he says, Claus, the others don't bring breakfast, so there's no breakfast. You've brought breakfast for nothing. And I thought, okay, I'll still eat breakfast, even if nobody else does it.
That's absolutely fine. We're at least in a breakfast still time-wise, because it's at least in the morning. The other one,
for me, it's 10.
Daily.
That's luckily my breakfast morning. No, I think apart from being a guy who says yes to things, even things that turn out later to be silly, I am somebody who has a tendency to do stuff. I think that's my core thing, is that I am neither a perfectionist nor particularly prideful. And that means that I actually get stuff done. The Innovation Cycle book right here is my book number 30 as an example. And I'm not really a writer. It's something that I've never really done full time. I do it on the side. I don't really like writing, but I've still managed to do 30 books. And the reason I mentioned that is not just so I can brag about having done 30 books, which I, of course, will, but mostly because one of the things that I think the world needs a bit more of, and that's what's landed me in innovation, is experimentation. It's doing things, it's testing things, it's prototyping.
Absolutely.
It's saying, what if we did it? What if we tried it? It doesn't really matter what it is, as long as it doesn't kill people, it's not too illegal. What if we tried it out? What's the worst that could happen? And often the worst that could happen is not that bad. And yet we don't do it. And then what's landed me in innovation is that I actually do things. And sometimes they're bad, sometimes they're really bad, but they get done. And then I learn, and others around me learn as well. And then I do another thing and another thing. And I guess that's what brought me here on the podcast. One of the things I did was I was the co-founder of the College of Extraordinary Experiences. And now I serve as the director there. And Jens was one of our participants and has been a lovely friend since.
Yes, and that's a long way
so
go.
You know that. Yeah.
Yes, I know that. So what was the last time you experimented?
This morning.
What was it?
It was 10 minutes ago when I was fixing breakfast, so I'd have breakfast for this interview. And our daughter, who is a 2.5-year-old maniac, said she wanted popcorn for breakfast. And she reached into the closet while I was taking my muesli and she grabbed the popcorn. And my girlfriend, who is a much more reasonable sort of human being than I am, said, Saga, popcorn and breakfast don't really mix. And I, being an idiot, said, why not? And then she had this like long-suffering look, and not Saga, she was happy, but Sue, my girlfriend. And then she said, okay, we'll try it out. If your father thinks it's a good idea, we'll try it out. Communicating, it's not a good idea. And it's probably not going to happen again, but at least we're going to try it.
Yeah, I get that. And then it's the worst is always the looks like you're just stepped over a line again.
Yes. And here, I mean,
I get that quite often.
Let's be fair. You know this yourself, that when you have a small kid, you want them to grow up healthy and empowered and happy and all these things. And of course, good food habits are part of that. And no, kids should not eat popcorn for breakfast because it's not necessarily the best kind of food habit. But that's not the same that they can't try it. She's not going to show up somewhere as a 25-year-old saying, well, it all started with that popcorn. And then
maybe she does. Maybe she does. You never know.
Let's hope she does. But yeah. No, so
you're lucky she's still 2.5. So you can hope that she will not remember that.
Exactly. That's when you should experiment with kids, because when they start remembering, then it's a different thing.
So staying in the part of experimentation, so you work as a coach, as one of your many topics you're doing. So how does that look like when you're coaching big companies around the world?
Ironically, the work I do as a coach, whether it's for individuals or for big organizations, is a lot about that as well. It's getting them to ask why not, and then getting them to go past why not and say how, and then getting them to go past how and say when and who and now. Because at the end of the day, when we come in as coaches or consultants or whatever it is, we're coming in and we're trying to open up possibility spaces. We're saying, here's what you've done on your own. Here's what you think. Here's what you think you could do. What about this? What about that? How about something that's a little bit different, or maybe a lot different? Have you considered that? And often they've considered it, but they've never done it, or they've stopped themselves. They've given each other that look that, no, we don't do that. We don't advertise on public television, or we don't call people in the gaming industry, whatever it is, they don't do that. So if you come in and you push a little bit and say, what about if you try? What's the worst that could happen? What if we call Brad Pitt right now? Well, what's the worst that's going to happen? He's not going to pick up the phone. Yeah, he picks up the phone and he says, who are you guys? How did you get my phone number? And please never do that again. Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Pitt. Sorry. But that's
or he joins us for the breakfast conversation. You never know.
You never know. But it's pretty certain that we're not going to get Brad Pitt on this podcast if we don't try calling him. The odds of him suddenly deciding to say, that's what I've always wanted to do. I wanted to join Jens and Claus on the Heitland Innovation Podcast. I'm going to do it right now. That's not happening. If we try, we might just get him. Now, I know chances are slim. None of us have his phone number. None of us know the guy. We probably know some people who know them, but even getting to them might be tricky. So it's not that I say we should do it right now, though I'm getting tempted as we speak. But
we should do that next time.
But we should
just invite him.
Yes, just to see, can we get Brad Pitt on your podcast? And what if we fail? Yes, if we spend tons and tons of time on it, that's something. But there's so many experiments out there, so many opportunities that don't cost that much in time and energy and money. They don't have a high opportunity cost, but people still shy away from them. I understand if we're saying, let's say we're Lufthansa, the airline, and we want to paint all our planes black and just only black. That's going to be pretty costly. Not only risky in terms of like brand value and that sort of thing, but it's also going to take a lot of time, cost a lot of money. But if I decide that I'm going to try to call somebody new or write somebody or try a new way of doing things, that's really not that expensive. And sometimes it leads to huge results.
Yeah. And what in my experience, the biggest thing is always the fear of failing, or the fear of like being perceived as being silly and not professional and so on. So when I was talking the other day, by the way, I decided last week that I will launch a podcast, and I'm recording 7 days after the third, and I published already 2. So I was saying to a couple of friends today, if I'm not innovating having an innovation company, then I shouldn't be out there. So I just did it. I just started. The first one was crap. The second one was crap. I hope this one will get better.
This
but
one's
I
going to
know,
be brilliant.
but that's only because of you. But I know that if I wouldn't start, if I wouldn't put myself out there, if I wouldn't step over my fear of failing and my fear of looking silly, being perceived as not professional, I will never be to the level like other podcasters or people on camera are, who have been, when you look back into their feeds or whatever, they have been crappy as I am right now. So, and that's what I always see with clients, that they fear that the world will break down when they do something that's not as it should be, in quotes.
Should be, yeah.
How about your clients?
Oh, yes. I think you hit it right on the nail, Jens, that one of the things most humans are really afraid of is being bad at something. They're not afraid of learning things. Everybody has this, I want to learn thing, but they're so afraid of being bad at something. And so far, very few people have come up with a way of getting good at something without first being bad at it. If you're going to play the guitar, it's accepted that you're not going to be very good to begin with. And I think what differentiates playing the guitar with learning a new skill like public speaking, or in this case, podcasting, is that you're putting yourself out there. The amount of people I know, both professionally and privately, who will say, yes, I'm doing this thing, guitar, for example, but nobody can see it yet. I'm not ready. If I go to somebody who's just picked up a guitar, they've played it for a week, and say, hey, how do you want a spot at a music festival? They're going to say, no, I'm not ready to show it to the world yet. And there's so many of the things, podcasting is a good example, that you show it to the world. And that stops people. So instead of doing what you're doing, which of course I think is the right way, is just go out there, do it. Who's going to remember it in 5 years when you're a brilliant podcast host with millions of listeners that the first episode sucked? The first two, not the first three. The first two.
The third one will be the turnaround point.
I'm sure the two others were brilliant because I know the people who were on that, and I know you, so I'm sure that was good anyway. But it's this fear of showing something bad because we don't want to be judged on that. We want to start out with the hit movie, the hit book, the hit whatever. But we forget that J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter, wasn't the first thing she wrote. The Beatles got rejected so many times and played as a live band thousands of times before anyone ever considered putting them on a label. And even though we know these things, people just forget them. And they're like, oh, I can't write, I can't speak, I can't paint, I can't whatever. And if they cross that hurdle, which is hard enough, then they only do it privately. Then they're like, oh, I can sing, but not for anyone. Or I can paint, but I don't want to show it. Or I can write and no one can see it. And to me, that's just baffling. Because I understand if you're proud, if you go out and say, I am the best violinist the world has ever seen. Join me on my YouTube channel, Claus and the Violin. And it goes like, that's going to be terrible because I don't know how to play the violin. I know this. Everybody else knows this. Or they don't know because how would they know about it? But there's no surprise there. So if I release a video of myself playing the violin called Claus Tries to Learn the Violin, what happens? People know I suck. I know I suck. It's not a bad thing. But unless you do that, then there's no problem in releasing what you do. The power of saying to an audience, I'm vulnerable. This is my first time speaking. This is my first time painting. This is my first time being on a stage or running a workshop is enormous because we all recognize that insecurity. And somebody who comes into a room and says, this is my first time, I'm nervous, will always get the empathy and so on. Unless, of course, they've been booked as a $50,000 speaker.
That's not clever.
No, then it's not smart. But if it's somewhere that's a little less scary, then we respond to that. We respond to that with empathy. But people are so afraid of that. And I don't know.
The fun part of that, you mentioned a lot of things there are more like on the edge of being professional, but that's the same way when you launch a product that's not 100% ready, when you launch a new service, when you turn your business around and do something completely scary, it's the same way.
Exactly the same way.
And it's what I see, at least a lot of companies or a lot of entrepreneurs don't understand, is that you will make it better with the feedback you get when you put it out there. If you try a year before you get it out there and you think it's perfect and nobody else likes it, you have spent a year of trying to make it perfect. If you throw it out when it's kind of half done, or at least on a stage where you could say, yeah, it's not completely crap, but I can learn with it, then you get the right feedback from your customers, from your clients to be able to develop it.
Agreed.
That's why I love this context of connecting the dots, not just collecting the dots, where it's really about how can you make things and grow with it, rather than just put something out and you think it's perfect and it doesn't work.
I guess part of that's also because we come from a world where it was different. There was a time when you did a thing, it was hard to change it. The digital reality we live in now, it's so easy. It's like absurdly easy to change, to adapt, to tweak, to upgrade because of the digital nature of things. Mm-hmm. But a lot of us still come from a world where that wasn't the case. And there are still many things where that's not the case. I mean, here's a Coca-Cola can. If you take this 33 centiliters and you say, why don't we make it 37? I mean, 33. That's like, let's make it 10% bigger. Let's make it 37 centiliters instead of 33. That's going to be an insane task. Supply chains around the world, transport, marketing, stocking shelves, handling things, return systems. It's going to be a huge thing. But if you take a ebook that you have on Amazon, you can use 10 minutes and you can upload the newest version and bam, then it's out there.
Yeah.
And I think our minds don't really grasp that where there was once only Coca-Cola bottles, metaphorically speaking, there is now the physical world that's hard to change once it's out there, and the digital world that is so easy that it's absurd.
Absolutely. So using that a little bit as a segue when you talk about books, so how did you connect the dots of innovation with your book?
So let's talk about books for a moment. One of the things, first of all, I allied myself with Robert. And Robert is an industrial designer and a visual facilitator. And he's really, really good. So it also means that everything in our book is illustrated. Even the table of contents is illustrated. And it's full of these beautiful, kind of humorous, simple sketches kind of explaining what's going on. So that was the first thing, that I got in somebody who could illustrate the dots in a different way than I do. I'm a decent writer and I can speak, but you can't really speak into a book. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So I had to rely on the writing. But with Robert, we teamed up, and that meant we both had the writing and the illustration. So suddenly we had a two-pronged attack already there. That was the first thing to do. The second was that we looked at innovation and looked at what's the problem with innovation. There are many, but one of the things that we saw was that so many people talk about innovation like a room you enter and then you come out on the other side and everybody's happy. And what happens in that room, it's like we're now in the innovation phase. Okay, what does that mean? Yeah, that's where it breaks down. So what we tried to do was we looked at what does that space look like? What does the innovation process look like? Others have done so before. We did it too, and said everybody should use our framework because the others don't do it well enough. Arrogant assholes as we are. And then what we did was we divided the innovation process into 12 distinct and easily graspable steps. Starting with somebody saying, what if the world was a little bit different? The impossibility phase, as we call it. And other people say, no, that could never work. And then it goes through a whole step-by-step process until the world is now changed and what used to be impossible is now just the new normal. And then somebody else says, but what if the world was different. And then it's usually the same people who helped invent the new possible that says, no, that would never work. And we give a lot of examples, and we make it simple and hands-on for people.
So how does it then help other people, like the readers, to connect the dots of innovation?
It helps them to connect them by letting them know which dots they're looking at. When I help clients, and I'm not alone in this, so we did a little research, put it that way, then one of the biggest problems when people are doing innovation is they don't know what they're doing at what time and at what phase of it. So an example is, let's say you have created, you and a company you work with have created some brilliant software for doctors. For German doctors, it's ready to roll out nationwide. It's a brilliant piece of software. Everybody will love it. It does all the things. And you even have government backing. So problem is, now you introduce it to the doctors and they don't like it. They think it's clunky. They think it's annoying. They like the one they had before better. All sorts of very human reasons. Now, if you look at this only from a technical perspective, which is a classic, and especially in software innovation, then you'll go back and say, we need to make it better. But the reality is here, the problem is not the thing you built. The thing you built is great. The problem is awareness, persuasion, teaching. It's all sorts of different things in this case. The problem is, how do you get the doctors to use the new thing? How do you get them to adapt that or adopt that? Not how do you make the thing better? And that is to me a core innovation problem, is people don't know where they are in the process. And that's what we've tried to do with the book, is try to make the process very clear, so you always know, are we at phase 4? Are we at phase 8? What are we tackling? And a simple one, when we talked about the Coke can before, is that we see a huge difference between ideation and improvement. Ideation is what happens in the workshop. It's what happens, it's the many kind of versions you go through before the thing goes out. And once it's out, and once it's hitting thousands or millions or hundreds of customers, then they're going to have ideas as well, and you're going to start making improvements. But that's a whole different ballgame, because now you're dealing with retailers, you're dealing with quality control, you're dealing with an existing brand, you're dealing with all sorts of things. And that means that you need to approach it differently. Where if you're just doing the thing before anybody sees it, it's easy to change, but it's hard to get feedback. And what you're doing with your podcast is brilliant. You're going kind of directly from, you're skipping the ideation phase. You're not messing around.
No, it was there, but it was not that long.
No. I know. You went through that like lightning, and now you're in improvement, which has some advantages, because you get much more and much better qualified feedback from actual users, or in this case, listeners. But it also means it's a little bit tougher, because some people will say, I liked episode 2 better. And then you think, oh, should I take that into consideration?
Yeah, absolutely.
All this sort of circus. But it's 2 different phases where a lot of people see it as the same thing.
Well, interesting. What I see as well, to what you mentioned between the lines, at least, that there's the human factor. Because you can have the best software product, the best process, whatever, but the human factor of all the different people with different interests in different parts. If you talk about large organization, that's like the sand, where it's like, I have different interests. Why should I use that software? I'm a doctor. I don't care about software. I care about my patients. So all of this,
bingo.
That's where basically I spend 80% of my work with my clients as well, to convince them everything you do, even if you're having, let's say you're building steel cans, you do this for people. Everything you do is for people, with people. So if you're not humanizing everything what you're doing, if you're not focusing on the humans and the human elements in this, as well when it comes to persuasion, telling the story, and you're master of that part, if you don't do that, it will not work. You can have the best steel can of the world. People will not buy it. They don't like it if you're not humanizing and explaining it to them.
Exactly. And if you're not if you're not selling them the experience rather than selling them the product. No, I could not agree more. And there's a second thing in that you might find interesting is one of the things we do is we differentiate between an idea, an invention, and an innovation. And an idea is saying, okay, how do we actually do something? How do we build a lamp or a moon rocket or a movement or whatever it is? But the invention is doing it. So Edison put down the light bulb as an idea, not just the rough sketch, not just like the imagination of, oh, it's a thing that glows, but like, how do you actually do it? Where you need the engineers and the people who know how to kind of get things out in the real world. But there's a far cry from actually making it work. That the idea phase is the blueprint phase. It's where this is how it should work. Invention is when you actually get it to work. And it can have changed quite a lot in that phase. And we contend that there's a huge difference between invention and innovation. That invention is creating the thing. Innovation is when somebody uses it to do something. I'm saying right now,
if I understand you right, it's like the application of the invention in maybe different spaces, different purposes, and so on.
Yes, and having an invention that sits in a garage for years and years and is unused doesn't change the world.
Yeah,
it changes when somebody says, "Oh, that suitcase, the one with wheels on it. I'm a business traveler. I like it. Let me use that." And that's when it starts changing something. But just inventing stuff is not necessarily the same as innovating, and vice versa. But a lot of people get them confused.
Yeah, no, definitely. So what is your experience? What is working with innovation and what's not working?
Number one, what's working with innovation is we're more and more seeing that people feel they need it. Innovation is one of those annoying buzzwords that everybody's talking about it. Everybody hates it, but everybody knows we kind of need it. Yeah, especially absolutely. Now. Corona has been a huge innovation game changer, not because everybody has done things, most have, but because we now see we can't keep on doing things as we did. We need to innovate. Now, on the bad side, one of the things that's not working is everybody becomes a specialist when things are possible. And when things when things are popular, everybody becomes a specialist is even worse. And we're just as bad as everybody else. But right now it's remote work and kind of the whole remote living, remote yada, yada. And suddenly everybody on their dog is a specialist on that. Hell, I even wrote an ebook on remote working. So I'm not claiming that I'm better than anybody else.
I even haven't heard about that.
You should. You should. I'll send you both the physical book and the ebook. We'll see which one arrives first.
Okay, cool.
But it means that everybody knows something about innovation right now.
Yeah, and no, I agree. There's a lot of stuff out there and a lot of people with different opinion. That's for me where I say that's why I want to connect the dots again. For me, it's not so much what is exactly innovation, because it's again the human factor. If I help entrepreneurs, which is my niche, I'm helping entrepreneurs to be more successful with their businesses. Where if I can help them to be better, to sell more, to whatever they dream of, like most of them have a dream. They have a big dream because that's how they went into the entrepreneurship. They want to change the world. They want to do this. They don't want to do that. And that's kind of the driving force behind them. And then helping them to creating that, helping them to making that happen through innovation thinking. And helping them, that's what I do a lot, is like empowering them to do that, and that they can repeat it again and again and again, because it's like you said, it's improving, it's iterating, it's looking at it from a different perspective, and then moving it forward. And then you get better, and then you will go closer towards your dream going forward. And that's
I think there you hit another thing right on the nail, and that is that these fancy titles and these words we use to differentiate ourselves are sometimes very useful, because are we talking about inventing or innovating? Are we talking about selling or marketing? On the other hand, once we get to actual problems, it becomes a lot more muddy. When you talk to somebody and say, okay, here's what you're doing. You create rock concerts for the blind. Okay, that's great. That's a beautiful ambition. That's a fun product. How do we help you do that better? Well, do we make your sales process better? Do we improve your marketing? Do we innovate on your experiences? Do we innovate on your team? Do we do organizational change? Do we do different strategy? All these sorts of things are all valid approaches to bringing more rock concerts for the blind to people. But when we actually sit in meetings and try to figure out how to help them, and they sit in meetings without any money and try to help themselves, it just gets muddied up, because then it's just about people suggesting, what do we do? And if you say, I'm an expert on helping people find out what to do, then they're like, that's great, but can you specialize a little bit more? So I think in some way it's tricky, right? Because on the one hand, language matters a lot, and what we're doing, you have a beautiful shirt that says innovateur, and even that's a way of standing out, and it's a way of saying, no, this is what I do. And on the other hand, when you're in a meeting, you might as well be giving sales advice as be giving innovation advice, and what the hell is the difference?
Yeah. No, I agree. That's often, especially when you work with entrepreneurs who are very, very fast and agile, and not the agile like big companies use. They're truly agile.
Like actually agile, yeah.
They don't even know how to write agile or how to use the process, which the official version, they just do it. And that's a bit my version of it as well. That it's so different. I 100% agree. So I have always an exercise in my
Yes.
in my 3 podcasts. Now it's just I always do a session where I say explain the pig. So I've researched your internet, and
you've researched my internet.
No, not your internet. Your not Facebook, Instagram profile.
My Instagram profile.
Yes. So you have a photo where you are wearing a silly costume, which it's not one. It's more photos where you have that. I know, but this one is like lifted. When you go to a space-themed glitter party, the glitter came later in brackets. You should always go for the maximum weird 50s space look. So what is the story behind that, if you remember that picture?
I remember that very well. And the story behind that is I've been to a lot of parties. So that's not the story, but that's just the preamble. That I've been to a lot of parties, and I've designed a lot of parties, and I've produced a lot of parties. One of the things that I've discovered, and this is not like rocket science, but it's a little bit space age anyway, is that there are some things, some affordances, if we're going to use psychology, or some alibis, if we're going to talk experience design, that always work. And one of those is glitter. If you design a party and there's glitter, you may have people giving disapproving looks, but they're very few, at least in kind of the spaces that I've traveled. I'm sure culture, all that sort of thing. I can't speak to how it would work in Indonesia, for example, but in kind of Western culture, glitter is one of those. It's silly, it's playful, it's sparkly, it's magical, it's weird, it's funny. We laugh and smile at the people who have it on for a party, and we secretly want to be part of them. And if somebody makes that possible, then more people will cross the line, and the more people have glitter on, the more people will want glitter on, yada, yada. So when I'm at a party and there's a glitter station, when somebody says, do you want to get glittered up? Usually A, I will say yes. And B, I will always go for the most ridiculous, outrageous,
I've seen that
space pirate look. You've seen that. And the reason I'll do that is, point one, because people love it. It's the easiest way to get compliments and open conversations, is by kind of showing off that you're one of the crazy people. which I am in general, so it's pretty easy. And because I have this huge beard, it allows for a lot of opportunity. Since I look like a weird throwback wannabe Viking anyway, then that combined with some glitter, that can really go places. And if you also have like a hat or something, then you're really getting there. But it also is, so that's one thing. It's something I do because I like to stand out, and it brings me into circles where I wouldn't normally be. It brings me into good conversations. The second is something about possibility space. And that's something I do in general, that I love creating possibility spaces for others. Glitter is a great way of doing it at a party. Oh, if he's wearing glitter, especially if he's the boss or one of the kind of the guys, whatever that means, then I could wear glitter, and I want to wear glitter. So I help open up. But it's this possibility space thing, and it's something you do with that as well, is that if you're in a space where you're either respected or trusted, or maybe you're just even a random person in the audience, and you ask a question that's fun and a little far out, but also sharp, you're opening up for everybody else that they can do the same. As long as they're not as mad as you are, then they're safe, because you're pushing the boundaries of what is acceptable in the conversation in a good way. We see it in politics in a bad way, that the rise of the nationalist right-wing parties in Europe that started some 20 years ago for real, it started shifting the conversation of what was allowed. And now that conversation is completely different than it was 20, 30 years ago, because they've been pushing the possibility space. And that I don't like that trend, not at all. But I like it when that power is used for good. So that means I love going to a lecture and making sure I get to ask a question, and the question will be fun and it'll be sharp, but it'll also be a little bit outrageous, and everybody will laugh. And not only will most of the audience now know who I am, it'll also free up other questioners to ask their questions, even though they might feel theirs was silly. At least they're not that guy.
Yeah. And that's another interesting perspective why you are a good innovator, because that's taking it to a different level. Having a normal conversation in an audience, when someone like you are jumping in and doing something like you just explained, it changed the conversation. It changed the conversation style. It helps everyone to think differently, because we're putting ourselves often into a box and we want to be seen and being recognized, but always in the way we are kind of putting ourselves in. So it always should be very, very professional. If it's business wise, should be always good. It should be this, it should be that. You should wear a shirt, you should wear this, and so on. It's like everyone goes into that route and everyone is then the same. So there's no real movement, no real innovation anymore. And that's the same with businesses, not just in auditoriums. It's the same if you're in a big company where like someone is asking a question which is provoking thoughts, which normally others wouldn't ask in the same meeting or in the same environment. And then it slowly starts to itch with other people as well, that they move on and do different things and act in different ways they would normally do.
Exactly.
And it's
exactly that. And I think there's a beautiful example from a project we did together a couple of years ago when you were still with IKEA. And there were some people there where IKEA done these like deep listening interviews, and found out that a lot of the kind of the consumers, let's call them that, and the customers in the shopping centers, that they felt like they were in a hamster wheel and they couldn't get off. And they felt frustrated, of course, because that's a lot of the world we live in. And we were doing some rapid prototyping exercises with a lot of these like boss level people, like really heavy executives who had big responsibilities and billion-dollar budgets and massive power within their own realm. And I remember we started by saying to them, we're going to do some stuff with you that's going to make you frustrated. We're going to not tell you what's going on. We're going to lie to you. We're going to frustrate you. But there's a reason to it. You've hired us to do this thing. There's a reason to the madness. It's going to make sense. But part of the journey is going to be some of you will be frustrated. And everybody's like, yeah, okay, we get that. We understand that. It's part of learning.
We have heard that before.
We've heard that before. And then during that, and I remember there was after like 1.5 hours, we had some people who left. They simply left what we were doing. And because they were so mad and so frustrated that what we were doing was useless and made no sense. And then we did something a little bit unusual, was that we called that to attention. And I remember that moment, that telling the rest of them who were there, saying, these people left. We could look at this and say it's because we're bad designers. Or we could say, if you're trying to understand the people who feel like they're in the hamster wheel, and you can't even take 1.5 hours of something that frustrates you, how well do you really understand them? And the looks are like, oh, ow, that hurts. Oh,
I remember that situation.
Ow. Are these like really powerful faces in expensive suits, some of them in casual clothes because this was IKEA, but still there was this look of shit. They're right. Damn, I'm glad I didn't leave even though I was tempted. And I think that sort of thing is we're so good at talking about understanding each other. We're so good at talking about doing things differently, but we're so bad at creating spaces for actually doing it differently. And I think that's one of my biggest kind of drives. Is one of my biggest passions is creating possibility spaces where people can do things differently.
That's a good one. Segue to my next question. So, what if you could build a transformative, innovation experience that everyone in the whole world would go through? What would it be and why?
Well, first off, let me start by saying I have no idea, because if I knew, I'd have done it already. But I can tell you a little bit about what sort of thing it would be. Not what it would be, but what sort of thing it would be. It would be something that was easy to copy. Seth Godin, the marketing genius, has a thing that he calls an idea virus. And the whole explanation is in the name. It's an idea that spreads like a virus. And for that to work, it needs to be replicable. It needs to be something that you can copy. And I think that we so often think in ideas that can reach a lot of people, experiences that can reach a lot of people, instead of thinking in experiences that can be shared. I'm just going to let that sit there for a moment, because I feel it's more profound than I maybe made it sound. So I'm going to let the silence do the talking for me. Now, what I mean by that is that telling somebody, here, I'm doing you a favor. I'm paying it forward. There's a movie long ago called Pay It Forward, where you basically were supposed to do something kind for a stranger. And if somebody did it for you, you were supposed to do it to the next person, or to 2 or 3 people, I think. And there's some crazy stuff, like a guy gives somebody his Ferrari and that sort of wild, fun movie stuff. But the reality is that if you can do something that's easy to copy, if I tell you a joke and you like the joke, and you tell one other person or 2 other people, and they tell 1 or 2 other people, that's going to hit the whole world.
Yeah.
Where if I tell a joke for an audience of 1 billion, I don't know what sporting event these days has an audience of 1 billion, but let's pretend that the upcoming, there's probably something. Let's imagine that I get an audience of 1 billion people and I tell them a joke and they all love it, but none of them retell it. And then it hits 1 billion people, and that's great. That's pretty impressive, but it doesn't travel. Or if I tell one person and it's good enough that they can retell it themselves, it's not advanced, it's simple, it's fun, it's profound, it's human, and they retell them. They tell it to somebody else. They retell it to somebody else. That's the transformative sort of event. I do something that is not only makes a difference, but is easy to copy, and easy enough to copy at a level where you, when I've done it to you, or whatever we're going to call it, I've delivered to you or done it with you, that you can take it on to somebody else.
Yeah, that's a good one. So going to one of the last questions, and then there will be a couple of more.
But of course, I still have a little bit of breakfast left.
Where will you be in a year from now, and what has happened?
So currently in investing, there are two main schools. There's one school that says if you don't have a plan with detailed numbers for the next 5 years, you're not serious. Then there's the other school that says if you show me a plan that's longer than 12 months, then you're not serious. I'm part of the last. And if there's one thing that I've learned over the last couple of years, it's that I have no idea where I'll be in a year. And if we look back a year...
Let's turn this around. What would be fun where you would be?
Aha. Well, one thing that would be fun, and let's not look at possible right now. One thing that would be fun would be to have less economic stress. Right now, I have a pretty stressful economic situation. That would be fun. Number two would be doing fewer things and getting to focus more on them. I right now have way too many balls in the air. And the only reason I have that is because of that economic stress and because I have the luxury that all the things I do have insane potential. I don't do anything that doesn't have great potential. It doesn't necessarily have great reality, but it has great potential. And that's a tricky situation to be in, that I have so many good opportunities, but not enough great ones that are worth sacrificing the good ones for. There are constantly more coming in the door, things that I can't say no to because that would be stupid. On the other hand, at some point, I need to start saying no to some stuff because I do run out of bandwidth. Yeah. But trying to figure out which of my horses are going to start running faster than the others, and which are just going to fall over and die. That's I'd like to have a few of those horses quit the race, since obviously I'm not good at quitting it for them, and some of them really taking off, some of them turning into rocket ship horses.
Yeah, that's cool. So, what would be an ask from yourself to the audience, to the listeners, and the people who are watching this, from a connecting and innovating perspective?
From a connecting and innovating perspective, I have a challenge for all of you out there. And it's very simple. And you can even see how it can be done if you go to my blog and check that out. I want you to write, whether it's a LinkedIn post or it's a blog post or it's a video diary or a podcast episode, I want you to do an unashamed compliment to somebody, an appreciation of somebody you know professionally. Privately, we're decent at doing that. Privately, we're decent at telling people I love you and calling our mothers and what sort of thing. I may not be the best at that, so I hope you're not listening, but I do love you.
I hope she is listening.
I hope she is listening.
One day at least.
Yeah. But professionally, at highlighting each other. And it's so powerful. Just going out, we have this huge circus called LinkedIn, which connects people all over the place to massive amounts of other people. And one of the things I've found is that the most powerful out there is not when you say what you did, but when you say, here's a person you should know. Here is a brilliant person for this and this reason. Not just, this is Jack. Jack's great. Woohoo, Jack. But like an actual, somewhat detailed appreciation of this person. And then post that. Because not only will you make somebody happy, I've done it 3 times now. They've all 3 cried. So that's pretty good as a success metric. Number 2, other people. Hello, Sandra. Hello.
Nice.
Speaking of the tornado right now.
Hello.
He's remote. Number 2 is People you know will think, oh, who's this person? Do I know them? Yes, then maybe I agree, and I'll also write something nice. Do I not know them? Maybe I should know them. Number 3, people who know them will say, Skip post pizza?
Yeah.
This is Saga trying to eat some of it. Do you want to eat some of it?
No.
Nope. No, she's trying to get
That's
me.
why I love that we keep that live and uncut.
Oh, yeah. Excuse me.
Yeah.
So Saga's now saying that I should eat it. I'll just get number 3 point in there before I eat more of the breakfast. Oh, big second. And that is that the people who know the person you're writing something nice about, the people who know the person you're appreciating, they'll see it and they'll go, wow, yeah, that's right. And they'll say something nice as well. They might even think, who is this guy who's saying the nice things? Maybe he might be interesting. So it's both a way of doing network expanding for you and for the person you're kind of doing the appreciation for. It's a way of connecting. It's a way of putting some smiles on some faces, maybe a tear in an eye. And it's a way of practicing gratitude in a very, very concrete way. And we all hear this, you should be grateful and you should be thankful and you should be open. Well, here's a simple way of doing it. And I said, I've only done 3 of them so far, and they've been smash hits, and they've gotten me new connections. They've gotten those persons new connections. Nice things have been said and warm feelings have been had. It didn't take a lot of time. So that's my challenge for those of you out there.
That's very, very, very nice one. I think it's a challenge which everyone can easily do if you jump over your own shadow. Yeah, absolutely.
And we feel so good doing it. And at some point, hell, who knows, somebody might write something about you.
Absolutely. So where can people reach out to you? Where can people find you, Claus?
Obviously, so they can find me on a small island in the Baltic Sea called Bornholm, where I now live, having moved from the big city, partly because of this one. But they can also find me on LinkedIn. That's by far the easiest. You Google me on the interwebs. There's only one Claus Raasted, for better and for worse. So I'm pretty easy to find. I have a solid digital footprint. But LinkedIn is by far the easiest, because that is now my preferred social media of choice. And I spend way too much time there. But it also means I'm easy to catch.
Yeah. Okay. So I will put the link as well in the show notes and in the comments below. Thank you very much, Claus, for being on the show. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. So my name is Jens Heitland, and I'm the founder of Heitland Innovation. I empower entrepreneurs through innovation coaching. And if you would like to hear more about myself and follow me on all the social medias, click the like button, follow me, share the video if you like it, and get more people to innovate. Thank you very much.
Take me to another place where the fairy tales don't end. Magical, magical land, magical, magical land. To another place where the fairy tales don't end. Magical, magical.